do you think of snakes? For me, not a problem. I quite like them. That is, as long as they're behind thick glass.
The tough shell proves more than a match for the sharp teeth of the mongoose.
In 1979, Japan made a decision that made complete sense on paper. People on a small island called Amami Oshima were getting bitten by one of the deadliest snakes in Asia, the habu viper, a pit viper related to rattlesnakes, thick as your forearm, with fangs that fold out like switchblades. In 1980 alone, 400 people on this one island were bitten. Some of them died. The antidote existed, but it had to be kept cold.
So you can see by their camouflage how they look just like a pile of dead leaves.
Yeah, in amongst all the other dead leaves.
And most of the bites were happening in remote villages with no electricity and no refrigeration. By the time someone carried a bite victim down a mountain trail to the nearest clinic, the venom had hours of head start. So Japan went looking for a natural solution, and they found what looked like the perfect one. An animal famous for one thing above all else: killing snakes. An animal so fast, so fearless, that Rudyard Kipling wrote a story about it. Rikki Tikki Tavi, fighting a cobra and winning. An animal whose blood carries a mutation in its acetylcholine receptors that makes it partly immune to venom that would stop a human heart in minutes. Scientifically classified as Urva oropunctata, the small Indian mongoose. 30 of them, imported from Bangladesh. Released onto Amami Oshima in 1979, within 20 years, every person involved in that decision would wish they could take it back. But here's the question that should have been asked before a single mongoose touched the ground, and wasn't. When does the habu hunt? At night. The habu is nocturnal. It comes out after dark, strikes after dark, bites people who step outside their homes after dark. The mongoose is a daytime animal, up at sunrise, asleep by sunset. These two animals were put on the same island and almost never crossed paths. The mongoose was supposed to be a snake killer. It turned out to be a snake ignorer. So what did 30 hungry mongooses eat instead? Everything else. They started with rats, then birds, then eggs scooped out of ground nests. Then they found something that changed the math of this story completely. Something that had never had a land predator on the island in its entire evolutionary history. Something that had no fear response, no escape instinct, no idea what was about to happen to it. The Amami rabbit, a small, dark-furred rabbit that exists nowhere else on Earth except Amami Oshima and one neighboring island. Scientists call it a living fossil, the last surviving member of an ancient family of Asian rabbits that once lived across the mainland. It's been on the IUCN Red List as endangered for decades. It doesn't run like a normal rabbit. It's slow. It nests on the ground in shallow scrapes under tree roots. It can't burrow fast enough to escape anything with teeth. Evolution never asked it to, because until 1979, nothing on that island had ever tried to eat it. And in 1979, it was handed over to an animal that eats anything slower than itself. The mongooses didn't eat one or two. They bred, spread, and ate their way across the island. By the year 2000, the population had exploded from 30 animals to 10,000. Let that land for a second. 30 to 10,000. On an island 712 square kilometers, about the size of a large national park. An island that also happens to be a UNESCO World Heritage Site, home to species that don't exist anywhere else in the world. 15 of those species were now being hammered by an animal that was never supposed to be there in the first place. The Amami rabbit was collapsing. The Ryukyu long-tailed giant rat, Diplothrix ligata, a species of spiny rat found nowhere else on Earth, was in free fall. Farm birds were getting raided. Crops were being stripped. The mongooses were spreading disease to livestock. And the habu snakes, the entire reason this started, were still out there, still biting people, still nocturnal, still completely untouched by the 30-million-year-old snake killer that was supposed to solve everything. Japan hadn't fixed the snake problem. They'd created a second disaster on top of it. And the worst part is, Japan should have known. Almost 100 years earlier, Hawaiian sugar planters had tried the exact same thing. 72 mongooses released in 1883 to kill rats eating the sugar cane, animals that had themselves been brought from Jamaica, where planters had first introduced them in 1872 with the same logic and the same results. The rats were nocturnal, the mongooses were not. Same mistake, same outcome. Hawaii's native birds paid the price, and to this day, the mongooses are still there. And if that parallel isn't enough, 40 years later, Australia tried to solve a cane beetle problem by releasing cane toads. Same biocontrol logic, same catastrophic result. Hawaii missed its window. Japan was about to find out whether it had missed its too. In 2000, the Japanese government launched an official eradication program. Traps along the roads, bait stations in the forest. The goal was simple: remove every single mongoose from the island. But here's what nobody tells you about trying to catch 10,000 mongooses in a subtropical jungle. The road traps barely worked. Mongooses are smart. They learn fast. Within months, the animals that survived the first round of trapping were the ones that had figured out how to avoid the traps entirely. The easy catches were gone. What was left were the cautious ones, the clever ones, the ones that stayed deep in the forest where no road could reach them. The program wasn't failing. It just wasn't winning fast enough. And then, in 2012, it almost died completely. Not because of the mongooses, because of accountants. A government budget review looked at the eradication program and couldn't see results they could measure. They couldn't put a number on, "We saved a rare rabbit." They couldn't calculate the return on investment for a forest that wasn't collapsing. The reviewers recommended slashing the budget drastically. The program that had been grinding through the jungle for 12 years was about to be cut off at the knees by a spreadsheet. What saved it was a study that spoke the only language a budget review understands: money. Researchers ran a valuation survey asking the Japanese public what they'd be willing to pay to have Amami Oshima free of mongooses. The answer came back at about $17 per person. Run that number across Japan's population, and the total social benefit of finishing the eradication was $1.69 billion. The total cost of the entire program from start to finish, $23.871 in public benefit for every $1 spent. The budget was restored, and the people on the ground changed the game. Starting in 2005, a team formed on the island that would become the backbone of the entire operation. They called themselves the Amami Mongoose Busters. Local residents, people who had grown up on the island, who knew every ridge, every creek, every patch of dense forest. People who had watched the mongoose eat the rabbits their grandparents remembered seeing in the wild. This wasn't a government contract to them, it was personal. They redesigned the traps, built narrow tubes sized specifically for a mongoose body, too small for anything else to trigger. They placed 30,000 of them across the island. They brought in trained mongoose detection dogs that could follow scent trails into terrain no human team could efficiently cover. They set up camera networks in the deep forest. And they went in, day after day, year after year. The capture numbers climbed. Then something shifted. The numbers started falling, not because the team was slowing down, but because there were fewer and fewer mongooses left to find. Each year, the captures dropped. Each year, the cameras showed less. Each year, the dogs came back with nothing. The last confirmed mongoose capture on Amami Oshima was April 2018. One animal, in a trap deep in the forest. After that, 6 years of silence, 30,000 traps, sensor cameras across the entire island, detection dogs working every season, the Mongoose Busters walking every trail they'd walked for years. Not a single mongoose found. On September 3, 2024, Japan's Ministry of the Environment made it official. The mongoose had been eradicated from Amami Oshima Island. 2 independent mathematical models confirmed the probability of any surviving animal at less than 2%. Governor Koichi Shiota called it genuinely good news for the island's ecosystem. Ministry officials used a different word. They called it a miracle. On February 7, 2025, the final step was completed. Every single mongoose trap on Amami Oshima was pulled out of the ground. 30,000 traps, removed one by one from the forest floor. For the first time in 25 years, the jungle had no metal in it. The island was clean, and they had reason to call it a miracle. There are only 9 places in the entire world where mongooses have ever been successfully removed after becoming established. Every single one was a tiny island, a few hundred hectares at most. Amami Oshima is over 600 times larger than anywhere this had ever been done. Conservation scientists, including researchers affiliated with Island Conservation, the organization that tracks invasive species removal globally, had said it was impossible at this scale. Japan did it anyway, without aerial poison drops, without mass chemical treatment, with traps, dogs, and a team of islanders who refused to stop. 32,600 mongooses captured, 45 years from first release to final declaration, $23.8 million spent, $1.69 billion in value returned. But the story doesn't end on September 3, 2024, because the Amami Mongoose Busters are still working. Same team, same island, same trails, but a different enemy. The mongooses are gone, and now feral cats are moving through the same forest, hitting the same bird nests, stalking the same rabbits and endemic birds like the Amami woodcock that barely survived the last 50 years. The team that spent a quarter-century learning how to find and remove an invisible predator from a subtropical jungle just switched targets and kept going. And on Okinawa, the other Japanese island where mongooses were introduced 70 years before Amami, the fight is nowhere near over. The conditions there are harder. Warmer climate, bigger suitable range. The population is being pushed back in the north behind specially built L-shaped fences that stop the mongooses from digging underneath. But officials have been honest. There is no timeline for declaring that island free. The Amami playbook is being studied. Whether it can scale to Okinawa is an open question nobody is willing to answer yet. And here's the part that should stay with you longest. The habu snake bites on Amami Oshima dropped to about 60 a year by 2020. Not because of the mongooses. They never touched the snakes. The bites dropped because the antidote got better. The rural clinics finally got refrigeration, and people learned to carry flashlights after dark. Simple fixes, available the whole time. The snake problem was always solvable without the mongooses. It just took Japan 45 years and one of the most expensive ecological mistakes in its history to prove it. And now, on the same island, a new team of hunters is walking the same trails, setting new traps, chasing a new predator, because the lesson of Amami Oshima isn't that Japan won. It's that on an island this fragile, the fight never actually ends.